say you've decided to start your own art club or class or Artsy Co-Op, but where are you going to teach? I'm Erica from Sparklettes Art, and today we're going to talk about deciding on the location for your new art club, art class, or Artsy Co-op. So when we first started homeschooling, art was actually a really intimidating subject for me. I'm not an artist, and I'm certainly not an art teacher, so I really wasn't sure how I was going to incorporate art in our lessons. And when I stumbled across Glitterbombers, the Sparklettes Art membership, I was like, this is amazing. There are so many plans to choose from. They all come with PDF files with step-by-step instructions that make it really easy, not just for me to do art, but for me to teach art to my kids. So it didn't take long for me to decide that I should really be hosting a class. I mean, there are so many homeschoolers around here looking for things to do, and art is such a fun thing to be able to do. They can bring their own supplies. Let's start with a free art class. And it just was like a fun thing that I was able to do because of this membership. It just made it easy to teach, and I thought, hey, why not, right? So we're looking for social opportunities as homeschoolers, and I decided to host Art in the Park, which is like a really common starting ground for classes like this. If you don't want to pay for a space, and maybe you're just doing one project at a time, maybe you're just doing a one-off to see how it goes, Art in the Park is a really great way to go about this because there's a lot of public parks, right? There's a lot of public spaces that we can give this a shot at. But there are some things that you want to think about if you decide to go that route, and we will be making a video about that probably in the very near future, so stay tuned for that. So another option, if you are not going to go the Art in the Park route, but maybe you still don't want to charge for classes and you're still trying to pull off something for free, you want to get used to saying this phrase. Hi, my name is Erica. I'm a local homeschool mom, and I'm looking to host some free art classes for the community. I was wondering if you'd be willing to donate some space to us. Ask people to donate space, okay? So donating the space, it looks good for them, it sounds good for them, it's building community, and a lot of places will be okay with doing that, especially if it's not something that you are collecting money for, and especially if it's something that maybe isn't like, 5 days a week. If it's just once a week or once a month, a lot of places might be okay with actually giving you the space for free. So some places that might be willing to give you a free space or donate the space to the homeschool community for this free class that you're hosting, maybe think about the library, okay? A lot of libraries have a room that you can rent, but if you talk to them, they're really always looking to build community and host events, so they might really be willing to offer the place for free. We found this out when our homeschool group decided to host an art show at our local library, and the night went so well that they approached us after the event. We thought they were trying to kick us out because we were a little rowdy with our homeschool crew, but they were really just excited that so many people had showed up and asked us if there was anything they could do to help us and to offer spaces. So we had some free space donated by the library, which was wonderful. So some other places you might think about trying to get either a free or inexpensive space for your art class are community rec centers, okay? So there are a lot of community rec centers all around, right? Maybe you have a YMCA or just a local town or county rec center in your area. And a lot of times they'll be willing to donate some space or to get you a good deal on some space. Don't be afraid to think outside the box though. There are some areas I know that are not super, there's not a lot going on, right? So maybe you don't have a community rec center, but maybe you have a senior center in your area. And a lot of times places like that are also willing to donate space or to give it to you for super cheap. Another option to think about would be a church. I mean, this doesn't have to be, you don't have to be a religious group to ask if your local church or if any of your local churches is willing to rent out space. Secular groups often use churches to rent out space because honestly, they're inexpensive, if not free. So if there are any churches in your area, maybe there's someone in your group that might have a connection, look into it, because if you're looking for space, they often have it for you. And a lot of times they have either classrooms or cafeterias, meeting rooms, things like that. So check into some local churches. So this next one depends on where you live. This isn't something that really exists in my area right now, but we used to live on Long Island. And on Long Island, where we used to live, there were a lot of neighborhoods that actually had their own community centers or clubhouses that were like for the neighborhood. So if you live in an area that might have something like that, a clubhouse for a neighborhood, look into that for yourself, for your neighborhood, or maybe somebody that you know, a family member, a friend, person from your local homeschool group. They might have an in, you never know. So another potential option for a place to host your new art class or co-op or club would be actually a state park. So a lot of state parks actually have classrooms that you can rent, which I didn't know, but it turns out it's actually a pretty big thing. So check out your nearest state park if you're anywhere near one and see if they've got a classroom that you might be able to rent, or see if they want to donate it. Some other spaces that you might want to consider for your new art class or club or co-op would be some privately owned businesses, okay? So near me, there's a space that's called the Mercantile, and it has a bunch of like local artists and entrepreneurs and just people who sell things there, but they also have a back room that they rent out for small group events that's empty during the day. And a lot of times, especially for homeschoolers, these business hours are dead for things like this. So you might be able to get either a donation or really good rate on a place like that because they're not super busy during that time. Which leads me into my next idea, which is checking out your local coffee houses. So some of them are pretty tiny, but there are definitely some coffee houses that are pretty big. And some of them are equipped to rent out a room. Some of them, if you're really lucky, like I got really lucky, actually have a space that is perfectly set up for art or paint nights. A lot of times people sublet space for these types of opportunities. So look at coffee houses around you because they actually are like a really great spot if you can find something that lines up. This way the moms, especially if you're hosting a class for younger kids, early elementary, the moms are going to want to stick around. You don't want them to drop off. You want them to stay just in case there's any behavioral stuff, they need help, if someone needs to use the potty. Obviously, you're going to want the moms to stay. So hosting at a place like a coffee house really allows for like some socialization for mom that's a little separate, but still keeps them in the vicinity so you can like run out and, little Joey needs to use the potty. So speaking of the moms, that's something important that you need to think about as well. When you're looking for a location, you want to think about how many kids are probably going to be coming, but you also want to remember that their adults are coming with them. So if you've got a room that only has 14 seats and there's nothing else around there, it might not necessarily work for the size group you've got going on. You really need to search and think about who's actually going to be attendance, because if you're working with younger kids, like I said, you're probably going to want moms to stick around. And you want to have a space for them. And you might want to even think about the fact, especially with homeschoolers, these are usually bigger families, and sometimes most of the time they come as one big family unit. So if there's a space that there might be a playground outside or something somewhere for toddlers to run around, because oftentimes you're getting a kiddo who's dropped off or who's coming to your class who might be like 7, 8 years old, but they've got a younger brother or sister who could wreak absolute havoc on the art class. So having enough space for mom to be separate and for siblings to maybe have a little separate area is a really good idea. And I'll talk about that a little bit more on future videos as well. So those are a few places you can consider if you're deciding to start your own art class or your art club, or if you're hosting an art co-op or getting something like that started. Those are a few places you can think about. There are tons of options. You just have to really put a little bit of footwork in. Think outside the box a little bit, and don't be afraid to make contact, right? Write those emails, make those phone calls, ask people to donate the space if you're not collecting money for your classes. If you are collecting money for your classes, it's a little harder to get space donated, but sometimes, like I said, they're willing to work with you, especially if you're doing cheap classes for homeschoolers, which most of us are. You can really find places within your community that will be willing to work with you. So put in a little footwork, find a space that you think will be your dream spot, and get to planning. So stick around with us, follow along on Soul Sparklettes Art. We're going to be talking all about setting up, making decisions, some tips and tricks and things to consider when you're setting up your very own art class, art club, or Artsy Co-Op. Take care.